This Father's Day at Lowe's, we have extra big deals for a very limited time, so you can get Dad the gift he's been wishing for. Get a free Select Craftsman, DeWalt, or Cobalt battery when you buy a Select combo kit. Plus, save $90 on a Cobalt 24-volt battery string trimmer and leaf blower combo kit. Now $129. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 6/15 while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Insurance isn't one size fits all, and shopping for it shouldn't feel like squeezing into something that just doesn't fit. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they show you options that fit your budget. Enough hunting for discounts, trying to calculate rates, and tinkering with coverages. Maybe you're picking out your very first policy, or maybe you're just looking for something that works better for you and your family. Either way, they make it simple to see your options. No guesswork, no surprises. Ready to see how easy and fun shopping for car insurance can be? Visit Progressive.com and give the Name Your Price tool a try. Take the stress out of shopping and find the coverage that fits your life on your terms. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
He gave me a book on art forgery. I found myself drawn to these old masters. How did these artists take paint from a palette, arrange it on a canvas? I began to unlock the secrets. I was a storehouse of knowledge of how to create an illusion, present it to a experienced expert, manipulate his mind, and convince him and bring him to the inevitable conclusion that the painting is genuine. We flooded the market with my paintings, and I couldn't believe what I did. I couldn't believe it. Then the dominoes started falling, and eventually the FBI were led to my door. They uncovered a mountain of evidence against me.
But they never actually got you. At this point, you've sold a lot. You've got like $1 million in cash. You sold one painting for $717,000. Why did it go away? Why did you never get indicted? And how are we having this conversation?
I guess that's the greatest story of all.
To hear how Ken Perenni made millions in art forgery, dodged the mafia and the FBI, subscribe to The Jordan Harbinger Show and check out episode 282 in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, the word YOGTZE is entirely meaningless in all languages, except to one man, Günther Stoll. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my Heimzinuk co-host, Alice.
Is that an entirely meaningless word,
No,
except
well,
in one language? Except in one language.
It's probably entirely meaningless, even in
The
any
way you said
language,
it.
really. But it means mysterious, maybe, in Dutch, which is close to German, and we're in Germany today, so
I will take that.
There
Good
you
job.
go.
So what you guys missed was Brett rehearsing this word. I didn't know he was going to pick this one for like 10
Stephanie
minutes.
trying to ruin
So
me.
he cares. He cares. When you send these words in, boy, does he care. And I get to sit here and laugh at his pronunciation, but it sounds so, Dutch sounds so good in a Southern accent.
I just don't know why all these words have to be so hard. Why don't you send me like a nice, straightforward word with like one syllable and easily pronounceable vowels.
Monosyllabic Anglo word.
G's that say G. You know? That would be great. Anyways.
Hope springs eternal. Hope springs
There you
eternal.
go.
Next episode.
Hope springs eternal. So, Alice, always good to see you. Always exciting to start one of these new cases. And this one, as you all know, my favorite cases are just mysteries. I know a lot of y'all love the murders. A lot of y'all love our deep dives into trials and innocence claims and all that stuff. And I get it. That's a lot of fun. But my favorite cases are just pure mysteries where something strange happens and we are left to grasp at the true meaning in more ways than one in this case.
Oh, a teaser. No, I agree. And we've been on a roll. I think we are proving all the naysayers who say we cannot be short and pithy with all these one episode cases.
That's true.
So look at us try to do this in one episode. I think we can. And it's a good mystery. This is a really good mystery.
So this case takes us to Germany. I don't know the last time we were in Germany. Was the last time we were in Germany when we did Hinter Kaifeck?
Oh, I think, was that season 1 or 2?
That was like season 1, yeah. Year 1 of the podcast. Well, we're back in Germany. We're in West Germany because we're also going back into the 80s when West and East Germany existed into Westphalia. So this is exciting. Those of you who are in Germany, I hope you enjoy this one. If you have any thoughts on this case, we'd love to hear from you. But going back to 1984, when 34-year-old Günther Stoll was living with his wife in Anshausen, West Germany. He was a food engineer by trade, which, by the way, I feel like food shouldn't be engineered. I mean, maybe it's just me. I think the fact that we have
You are
food
living in the
engineers-
wrong times because all the
that's
food
right.
we eat is engineered. I actually think about this. I'm like, I understand crossing, like Cara oranges. Have you had these before? They did not exist when we were children. I think it's one of the engineered oranges. Do you know
They
what I'm
have like
talking
those
about?
like cotton candy grapes.
Cotton candy grapes, which I actually don't like because they're way too sweet and they're like engineered. I'm like, I know this is also how nature works, but is this healthy? Like, should grapes actually have this much sugar in it? I don't know.
Well, Günther, was probably on the cutting edge of this because it was 1984. So food engineer probably just meant like he added the dye that made the Fruit Loops bright red. But in any event, he was a food engineer. He was in a period of unemployment, and he also was having some issues. Now, like so many mysteries, we have very little about what happened before the events we're going to discuss, which is kind of disappointing because I think it would probably illuminate a lot of things. But all we really know is that going into the period of October 25th and 26th of 1984, he had been experiencing some mental health issues. He had been plagued by a moderate case of clinical paranoia. Now, this is always described as a moderate case, though. I'm going to tell you what he was thinking. Seems pretty serious to me. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I was going to say paranoia in general. I don't know if there's moderate cases. It's kind of like I have a touch of anxiety. I'm like, any type of anxiety is pretty anxious.
Right.
Anxiousing.
And in this case, according to Günther's wife and his close friends and family, he was very nervous. He was anxiousy and jumpy because he believed that they were out to get him. Now, he never gave many details on who they were, but nonetheless, he seemed to be truly concerned for his safety. And, sometimes, are you paranoid or just right? Whatever his mental state was, it would all come to pass. One night, he was sitting home with his wife, and he suddenly had an epiphany. One that would ultimately lead to his untimely death and create an enduring mystery that has far outlived him. One we are going to discuss today.
So let's go back to October 25th, 1984. On that evening, Günther Stoll, he's sitting at home with his wife, cozy in his armchair. But suddenly, he jumped up and yelled, I don't know how to say this. I don't speak German. Not a lick of German. So I'm sorry for how I'm going to pronounce this. But suddenly, Günther jumps up and he yells, "Jetzt geht mir in Licht auf," which loosely translates to, now I get it. So I'm really sorry. I know that's not what it sounds like in German. I did my best. But he jumps up. There's nothing going on. He's not having a conversation. He's not trying to figure out some sort of puzzle. He just jumps up and out of the blue says, now I get it. So Google Translate actually says, now a light goes on for me is the literal translation.
This is so like poetic.
It's poetic.
Yes.
Wow. You can see quite literally a light bulb going off, but that's what he yells out. When he does this, he quickly reaches for a piece of paper and a pen, and he jotted down the phrase YOGTZE, spelled in all caps YOGTZE. Or he wrote YO6TZE. So it's debated whether he intended to write a G or a 6. But almost as quickly as that epiphany began, it seemingly ended when Günther crossed out the phrase he had just written down. YOGTZE. For what it's worth, it looks like a G to me. But G to the first power.
All right, so he has this epiphany, the light goes off for him, and then he crosses this word out. But he's not done. At this point, he jumps up from where he's seated. He goes outside. He gets into his Volkswagen Golf MK, and to those of you who've ever experienced a Golf, rather small car, 2-door, like most European vehicles, pretty tiny, and heads for his favorite pub, because what are you gonna do when you've had an epiphany? What better time than to head down to the pub and have yourself a pint? He goes to the Papillon, which is Papillon pub, which sounds delightful, located in nearby Wilnsdorf. So he gets to the pub shortly before 11 p.m. and he orders a beer. But before he could even take a sip, this is the true tragedy of this case, before he could even take a sip of the beer, he collapses to the ground, whacking himself on the face as he fell. Now this was bizarre because witnesses would describe him as anxious or possibly even distressed, but no one thought he appeared drunk, and there's no evidence he had been drinking up to this point. But for whatever reason, he collapses and hits his head. At this point, he doesn't stick around for questions or any kind of help. He comes to, and he immediately leaves the pub, gets back into his car, and starts heading ostensibly in the direction of home at around 11:30 p.m.
So about an hour and a half after leaving the pub, it's now crossing into the next day, October 26th at 1 a.m. Stoll is spotted again, but this time in his childhood town of Hagerselbach, roughly 10 kilometers from Wilnsdorf. Not home, but rather childhood home. He shows up at the doorstep of an elderly woman who he'd known from his time living back in Hagerselbach. So he knew this elderly woman from, way back in his childhood. Now, considering it's 1 a.m, the woman does not let him into the house, but she did talk to him briefly. He was paranoid and he was clearly incoherent. Now, he warned the woman that something horrible was going to happen that very night. Look, even if I knew you, Brett, even if you came up to my door at 1 a.m. and you're speaking kind of in an anxious manner, saying something terrible is going to happen, but you don't seem all together yourself, I probably would be pretty freaked out and I may not be taking you seriously. I'll think something's happened, right? So the woman is worried for him and she advises Günther to go home or to his parents' house, but he's not well. Now he nods in agreement and he leaves her steps.
So at this point, Günther, he gets back in his Golf and he drives off. And that brings us to 3 o'clock in the morning. Now we don't know what exactly happened over those 2 hours. But what we do know is that at about 3 o'clock in the morning on October 26th, 2 truckers were driving along the Autobahn A45 when they spotted a Volkswagen Golf in a ditch near the Hagen Süd exit, which is roughly 62 miles from Hagerselbach. So, at this point, let's see, Hagerselbach was 10 kilometers from Wilnsdorf. He's now 62 miles. We're mixing our distances, but whatever.
What can we say? We're doing our best as Americans.
Yeah, from Hagerselbach. So it's unclear where he's going or why he's going there, but he's headed off. And as they approached the crash site, they both reported seeing an injured man wearing a white jacket, walking away from the scene. So, just to orient you, these two guys driving along the road, they see the car in the ditch, and there's a guy, what looks like a man, who looks like he's injured, wearing a white jacket, walking away from the scene. But this is not Günther, because this is going to get even stranger. One of the truckers goes over to the car to investigate, while the other goes to report the crash on the nearest roadside telephone. Remember, it's 1984, no cell phones. If you're going to report the crash, you got to go report it somewhere else, and they had these roadside telephones, which were fairly common back then, and even now in some places, you'll have these emergency phones. So he heads off to do that. The other guy, he goes down to the Gulf, and he probably expects to find it empty. Like, he doesn't know who this guy in the white jacket is, but he probably thinks that's the driver. But what he sees is something very strange indeed. Günther Stoll is still in the vehicle. He is obviously seriously injured, but even stranger, he's naked. And he's in the passenger seat. So he's not in the driver's seat, he's not wearing any clothes, and he's very injured. Now, he is clinging to life, but he is still able to speak to this trucker. And he tells him that there had been 4 other people in the car with him. Though he was careful to add, these people were not his friends. Now, let's go ahead and tell you, this is a little strange, because as we said, that means 5 people in the Gulf. That would be a tight fit. They really piled in there, if
and
that's true.
And he found them in the last 2 hours, in the middle of the night between 1 and 3 a.m.
Right. So he goes on to say that he was traveling with these 4 strangers, who he didn't know, when they, quote, beat him loose, which I assume is like some sort of German idiom, right? So they beat him up and they leave him alone in the car. He doesn't really explain how the crash happens, so there's a little bit of a gap there, but he's saying there's 4 men, and the truckers, they didn't see 4 men, but they did see one person walking off.
So remember, the other trucker had gone to report this crash, and at that point, an ambulance arrived to transport Stoll to the nearest hospital. But unfortunately, he was very injured, so much so that he succumbed to his injuries en route to the hospital. An investigation into Stoll's death began, and it was quickly determined that his cause of death was vehicular manslaughter. Strangely, his autopsy determined that he was actually run over by a different vehicle and that he was naked when he was run over. Police believed that someone had run Stoll over at a different location and then placed him in the passenger seat of his own car. But that's about as far as they got in the investigation. Police were never able to determine the identities of the 4 people reportedly with Stoll, nor were they able to find the man seen walking away from the scene. Stoll's shoes were located in his vehicle, but his clothes were never found. They were also not able to obtain a copy of the YOGTZE note, as Stoll's wife had thrown away the piece of paper earlier that evening, unaware of its significance. Instead, she recreated it from memory for the police after the fact. However, we don't have a confirmed image of that recreation, but there are 3 images of this YOGTZE phrase that often circulate. So note, none of these are what Stoll wrote. None of these are what Stoll's wife wrote, and Stoll's wife is the only other person who saw the note. But she did recreate it, and others saw the recreation at one point.
So we're going to put these on the website, prosecutorspodcast.com, if you want to see them all in one place. Or obviously you can Google it. We'll describe them for you if you're listening. If you're watching now, if you're a patron, you're watching now, I'm putting them up on the screen. But essentially, what they appear to look like, and once again, these are all recreations, but I would love to see the recreation that his wife did. That would be a little bit closer, right? But what appears to be is Y, and in the recreations, a lot of the recreations, the Y is very prominent. It's very clearly a Y. We're going to get to a recreation later on where it's not. Another thing, if you're German, I would be curious, because one thing that people have speculated is that some of these could be numbers. So for instance, there's a Y and then there's an O, but people have speculated maybe that's a 0. In the United States, we don't often really differentiate between O's and zeros. Sometimes you put a slash through it, but a lot of times you would just draw it. I'm curious, in Germany, how you would write these letters, and would you actually mistake them. If you write in about that later on, we'll be sure to read that in a future episode. But Y-O, or 0, G, then what appears to be like an apostrophe or an accent mark or something after the G, which I would also be curious, if you're in Germany, what that might signify. Then a T, then a Z, sometimes depicted as having a slash through it, sometimes not, and sometimes depicted as quite obviously a Z, and sometimes looking more like it might be a 2. Then E. So this is commonly read as YOGTZE, which is what we've been saying, though it could be Y-O-G or possibly even Y-O-6. And another recreation that people have done of this is with a sort of less obvious letters, more numbered, where if you flip it upside down, it could be 027906, and the accent mark would be a comma between 027 and 906, which could be all sorts of things, could be a number, could be coordinates. I don't know what it could be, but these are possibilities for what this is. Unfortunately, we're speculating about this, and we're going to speculate later about what the meaning might be, but we don't actually have the original is destroyed forever. There may be a recreation somewhere in German police files, but what we're relying on are recreations of a recreation.
I mean, that's not much to go on, right? I mean, this is farther than primary evidence, not even secondary evidence. So there's very little to go on in this case, except I will say, at first, you all may have been thinking, because I was thinking the first time I read this, oh, he's just a guy who's having a mental episode. Like, YOGTZE doesn't mean anything. He hits his head so that maybe he was concussed as well as having a mental episode, and he's just kind of this crazy man having an episode and then crashed his car in the ditch. Except for the fact that his autopsy really does show, because you can imagine maybe he stripped himself naked and imagines he's with 4 other people. But the fact that he was run over while naked with someone else's car, and then someone put him in the passenger seat of his car and left him there with these truckers seeing someone walk away, that's the part that makes it so mysterious. Because otherwise, I would probably file this away as a very unfortunate mental episode that ended in someone's death.
And, you know, you think about this sort of last message type thing. We've seen this before. So when we did Ray Rivera way back early in the podcast, we talked about in that case, Ray Rivera seemed to be suffering from some sort of mental issues, some sort of mental illness. Unclear exactly what it was. People debate that and dispute it. I think it's pretty clear that he was. And one of the things he left were writings, fairly extensive writings, much more than YOGTZE, taped to the back of his computer before he died in what appeared to be a suicide, though some people have thought might have been murder. And very similar in some ways. Paranoid, thinks people are following, thinks people are out to get him, writes something down, disappears, nobody can find him. He's then found dead in strange circumstances. A very similar case. Another case we did was the Brandon Lawson case, which you may recall it's not a writing, it's a 911 call. Very unusual, strange, evocative 911 call where you have him giving this message to a 911 operator that, kind of like YOGTZE, you can't even understand what the words are at times. You can't even really follow what he's trying to say, and you certainly can't put it together in any sort of coherent narrative. A lot of people thought all sorts of things were happening. We speculated that probably, unfortunately, he was under the influence of some drugs, was hallucinating, and probably just died in the wilderness. That was later confirmed. His body was found not very far away from his truck. It took several years to do it, a lot of searching, because it's oftentimes just difficult to find people. Found his body, very obvious that he wasn't shot, he wasn't murdered, he died in the elements, and there was nothing to what he said. I feel like this is really difficult for us. We all want to make sense out of chaos. We do it all the time. You look up at a cloud and you see a rabbit. I mean, there's not really a rabbit there, right? That's something we do. It's part of being human. It has some advantages if you're out in the wild and you're trying to tell whether or not that's a tiger in the bush or just a bush. It's important, but we're always looking for that. And it bothers us when we can't find order. And we have that here. You have this very sort of chaotic thing, this chaotic story, and this note. And you think, if we could just figure out this note, we would know what happened. But very difficult to do, especially given that we don't even have the original. So as Alice said, there's not a whole lot to go on here. We have what the truckers saw, we have what Günther said right before he died, and we have the note, and the story sort of goes cold. And for 40 years, it was the source of a lot of speculation, a lot of conspiracy theories, really trying to figure out what happened. And then in April of 2025, so just last year, the case was actually closed. And the way it was closed and the revelations from the closure have in some ways raised more questions than answers and have led some to wonder whether maybe Günther really was involved in something and there's some sort of cover-up going on. Because what the police will tell us is completely different from what they said way back in 1984. So the Hagen police presented an update on the case. They had decided to reinvestigate this whole case for some reason. They're going to reinvestigate it. And they determined that Günther Stoll's injuries actually did not match up with him being driven over. Which, let me just say, that doesn't seem like something you would get wrong if you were the pathologist. Like, that seems like something that has some very obvious hallmarks.
Like the tire treads are different than the tire, like.
Just like the injuries to your body from being run over, I would think would be very specific. And if you get run over, unless something really strange has happened, then that means somebody else is involved. And then you have the other indicators of someone else being involved. You have the guy wandering off, and you have Günther talking about 4 people. But now the police are saying, never mind. No, he wasn't run over. So they go out and they reconstruct the event. And in fact, they determine not only was he not run over, they say he died as the result of a single vehicle accident. Maybe some of you are thinking about the Silkwood case, right, where we talked about that a lot. It's always interesting when you have these reexaminations, which we've discussed in other cases, because you do a reexamination and you think there is an obvious difficulty in determining something based on photographs and reports versus the people who were on scene. And the people on scene were saying one thing, and now you have the police saying something different.
Insurance isn't one size fits all, and shopping for it shouldn't feel like squeezing into something that just doesn't fit. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they show you options that fit your budget. Enough hunting for discounts, trying to calculate rates, and tinkering with coverages. Maybe you're picking out your very first policy. Or maybe you're just looking for something that works better for you and your family. Either way, they make it simple to see your options. No guesswork, no surprises. Ready to see how easy and fun shopping for car insurance can be? Visit Progressive.com and give the Name Your Price tool a try. Take the stress out of shopping and find coverage that fits your life on your terms. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. You guys, here's something that keeps me up at night as a parent. Our kids are the first generation growing up on ultra-processed foods, and the long-term effects, we're only beginning to understand them. That's exactly why Hiya exists, to give parents a real solution in a market flooded with kids' vitamins that prioritize candy-like appeal over actual nutrition. Some children's vitamins on the market today contain up to 7 grams of sugar per serving and are stuffed with artificial additives and petroleum-based dyes. Hiya took the opposite approach. 0 sugar, 0 gummy additives, just clean nutrition. And the crazy thing? Kids actually love them. The taste, the experience, all of it. And I can say that from personal experience. You guys know that I have 4 kids. My kids all love Hiya vitamins. They each got their adorable glass bottle with these cool stickers that Haya sent so they could personalize their own vitamin bottles. And they love the taste of it. They're the ones who remind me every single night after dinner, it's time for our Haya vitamin. Not me, they're the ones who drive it. And that's because Haya knew that they wanted to formulate something around specific nutritional gaps. They worked alongside pediatricians and nutrition scientists, and they created a powerful chewable vitamin that packs a blend of 12 organic fruits and vegetables plus 15 essential vitamins and minerals into every dose. We're talking vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, all the foundational nutrients that support immune health, brain function, mood regulation, and concentration. And here's something every parent needs to hear. If getting your kids to eat vegetables feels like an impossible daily battle, Haya's new Kids Daily Greens and Superfoods is a total game changer. It's basically chocolate milk stuffed with veggies. It's a greens powder designed specifically for kids that's packed with 55 plus whole foods sourced ingredients. Just mix 1 scoop with milk or milk alternative and watch them actually enjoy something that's secretly fueling their growing bodies. We've worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hayahealth.com/prosecute. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hayahealth.com/prosecute and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. You guys know that I'm busy, constantly traveling, doing the podcast, lawyering, being a mom to 4 kids. I need my shapewear and my bras to be comfortable, but also supportive all day. And that's why I absolutely love Honeylove. It is not an exaggeration when I say they are my most worn bras and shapewear because I can wear them all day, feel supported, look great, but also be able to move throughout my day to do all the things I need to do. Their bras are so comfortable. I just spent about 8 hours on a flight and I wore my Honeylove bra the entire time and it did not bother me at all. Because here's the thing, at a certain point in life, your body just changes and the bras you used to love stop working the same way. And that's where Honeylove comes in. Their bras have no slipping, no constant adjusting, just a secure, flattering fit that actually stays in place. Honeylove is an independent female-founded brand. All Honeylove products are intelligently designed by women who actually wear them, including founder Betsy, who's highly involved in the development of each product. And let's be honest, finding the right bra as you get older can feel frustrating. What used to work just doesn't anymore. You want lift, shape, and support, but without stiff wires digging in and bulky padding that feels outdated. And that's where Honeylove stands out. Their bras are designed to provide lift and structure using innovative bonding technology instead of uncomfortable underwire. So you get that secure, lifted feel without the poking, pinching, or constant adjusting. And their new crossover contour bra is a perfect example. It combines their best-selling wireless design with molded foam cups to help create a smooth, natural shape, especially helpful for mature breasts that may want a little extra structure and support. Treat yourself to the most advanced bras and shapewear on the market. Use our exclusive link to save 20% off Honeylove at honeylove.com/prosecutors. That's honeylove.com/prosecutors. After you check out, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Experience the new standard in comfort and support with Honeylove.
So what caused the accident is unknown, but the investigation concluded that Günther was not wearing a seatbelt when his car left A45 and hit a patch of trees. According to them, the force of the crash then catapulted him into the passenger seat. So he gets into this wreck and he's thrown from the driver's seat into the passenger seat.
I mean, I'm no physicist. That just seems like a strange way to fall, right? I mean, most people who are not wearing their seatbelts get catapulted from their seats, but usually through the windshield rather than sideways.
Well, and I will note, there is a photograph of this vehicle available, and it shows very clear damage to the center of the hood. And one would think if you hit the trees and you're not wearing your seatbelt and you hit something dead on such that it collapses in the center of your hood, that would throw you out through the windshield. I mean, we see that all the time. That happens all the time. But instead, you have this very strange circumstance where Günther is not thrown through the windshield, but he's thrown into the passenger seat, which seems a little strange. And I'll just note, they don't find his clothes. So was he driving naked? Which is absolutely possible, I guess.
No. He did have his shoes on.
He did have, that's a
Or
good,
at least had his shoes in the car.
the shoes were in
But
the
maybe
car.
the force of the catapult removed his shoes of the only thing that he was driving.
Now look,
And
that's possible, right? And we've been talking about how he's having these mental issues. He's having these mental breaks. We have 2 hours that are unaccounted for. And he wasn't that far away. I mean, remember, he sees this lady that he knows at around 1 a.m. He sees her in Hagerselbach. He's only 62 miles away from Hagerselbach when these truckers find him 2 hours later. So it would have taken him about an hour to get there. Goff doesn't drive very fast. Even though he's on the Autobahn, he's putt-putting along. It'd take him about an hour to get there, but he's got an hour that's unaccounted for. Could he have removed his own clothes? Sure. You see that oftentimes. We've seen that in several cases where people apparently have removed their own clothes. The Jason Landry case we talked about, where Jason Landry, he's driving home, he gets into a car wreck. We end up finding his clothes in his backpack not far away from the accident. The police didn't even bother to search, so they didn't see it. He hasn't been found since. But unless you think he was abducted and then forced to undress, I think most people think he hit his head and then took his clothes off. And remember, whatever was going on with Günther, we have multiple sort of incidents here. You've got his prior mental issues. You've got YOGTZE. Then you got his collapse, his sort of unaccountable collapse in the pub. Then he hits his head. Then he takes off. So he's got a lot going on, which maybe could have led to him being unclothed. But as Alice notes, the only clothes you're finding in his car are his shoes. Where'd everything else go?
there was at least one other stop.
Right.
Then, where the clothes were left.
Exactly. And as we're going to see, the police are going to continue to poo-poo this theory that maybe there are other people involved. But wherever he's going, would it be that crazy that he runs into somebody? You know, that somebody sees him throwing his clothes in a bush or whatever, taking his clothes off? So we have the police. They're now saying he was not run over. He was in a car accident. His injuries are from that accident, but he's not thrown out of the car, which is often what happens and often causes a lot of injuries. Instead, he's thrown into the passenger seat where he is found.
So he did die from injuries, and they'll say that he died from car accident injuries. This is very peculiar because you would think that this is the most miraculous way to actually get hit, where he doesn't go through the windshield. The windshield, if you look at the picture, is not, I don't think it's smashed.
It doesn't look like it's smashed to me.
It doesn't look like it's smashed. So in other words, there's no blunt force trauma from catapulting off the windshield, let's say. And so he somehow essentially like rolled to the passenger side seat, but that action, which did not break any windshields, was enough to kill him. That's really peculiar too, because it's not just the positioning of where he is or the lack of clothes. It's also that whatever led him to, I wouldn't even say catapult, I'd say like essentially roll into the passenger seat was enough to kill him.
Yeah, and I just got to say, like, and it's a small car, so I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here. We spend a lot of time talking about how most conspiracy theories are false. But when you just read what the police are telling you, it doesn't seem to line up with anything we've heard up to this point. This is not like a slight variation or, well, we always thought this was a possibility and now the police have been able to confirm it. It's everything we knew for 40 years. If you listen to a true crime podcast before April of 2025, the story you'll get is completely different because they didn't have any of this information. And it's completely different. It couldn't be more different, right? Then the police say that they are able to determine that there was no foreign DNA in the car. Now, I got lots of questions.
I got a lot to say about that.
What you got?
1984. They don't know DNA. They don't know to collect DNA. So even if they knew to collect DNA, they didn't have the foresight to know where to collect DNA. So the fact that they have no foreign DNA in the car only tells me that it's 1984. And DNA is so barely understood at that point that unless there are like buckets of someone else's blood, which I'm not even sure they could totally tell it was someone else's blood at that point, they would have known to collect it. So for an April 2025 reinvestigation to definitively say there's no foreign DNA seems like a wild grasp that can't possibly be rooted in that case file.
I mean, I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, and unfortunately, they didn't release the report. There's a lot of public reporting on this. They made a lot of public statements about it. I really wish police departments, when they did something like this, they would release a full report. That's so helpful when they do that. And you're able to read it and really understand what they're trying to say. You know, in this case, I don't think there's any way they kept that car for 40 years. Maybe they did. You know, maybe that car has been sitting in a German police lot through reunification, through 40 years of change, just sitting somewhere. And then in 2025, they're like, oh, we should see if there's any DNA in it. Maybe that happened. And if you're in Germany and you have more information on this, we'd love to hear it. We'll do a whole update on this case when the Germans write in. It's the Germans when they write in. But I don't think they did that. And if they didn't do that, number one, even if they did keep the car for that long, I don't think there's any guarantee that anybody was trying to preserve DNA. Because they didn't even know what DNA was. So I don't know why they'd be doing that. So like Alice said, and even if they had blood, all that would tell you is there was no blood from someone else in the car. And Günther doesn't say anyone was in the car with him when the wreck happened. I mean, this is a little weird, right? Like, it's possible that they went somewhere, the guys got out, he's trying to get away, and that's when he loses control. That's a possibility, right? For instance. But assuming they didn't keep the car, even if they did keep the car, I don't think there's any way they would be able to say there's no DNA in that car. They certainly didn't swab for DNA at the time. So I don't know how you say this. Even if you had the car, I don't know how you'd say it. But I don't think they had the car. So the whole thing feels, I'm not going to say it's a cover-up, because why would you cover up something that happened in 1984 with a 2025 report? That doesn't even really make sense. It's not like people
honestly, you could just close the case and no one would know anything, right? Because it's not like it was at the forefront. Right. And the police close cases all the time, and it's just like administrative. And honestly, doing this just brought more attention to the case. Because before this, it was just people who were interested in quirky little mysteries out of West Germany who talked about this. All of a sudden, you're going to have this big report on it. That's going to bring more attention to it. So it doesn't make any sense that you're doing this as some sort of cover-up, but it also feels very strange. And I think you should look at reinvestigations with the same skepticism you might look at the initial investigation, because there's no reason to think, well, we're all perfect now. We made so many mistakes back in 1984, but now we're perfect. So if we did a reinvestigation, well, then that's what happened. Can't trust those original guys. So I don't know. I just think it's a little strange, but nevertheless, they closed the case. Now, it is one of the most unfulfilling closures you're going to have, because they do not explain what YOGTZE means. In fact, they say it's completely irrelevant. And maybe they're right. They basically say, look, he had some sort of mental break. He got into an accident. He died. Whatever happened before, completely irrelevant. You know, it's kind of like Maura Murray. Maura Murray got into a car wreck and walked into the woods and died. Whatever happened before that, completely irrelevant. Doesn't really matter. Okay. I mean, maybe, right? But kind of weird that it just so happened to happen on the same day. Anyway, so it has nothing to do with it. They don't believe any of these men existed, because they say, you know, he's suffering from paranoia and depression. He's been acting strangely. He probably hallucinated all four men. The problem with that, the truckers saw somebody. Like, the truckers very specifically say they saw a man in a white jacket who appeared to be injured walking away from the area of the wreck. Maybe a coincidence, but that's a lot of specificity. Man, injured, white jacket. It's not just they might have seen something in the distance moving. They actually saw a man. No explanation for that from the police either. They also just say that's a coincidence. So the official position of the German police is mystery solved, nothing to see here. He died in a single car accident. While the rest of us are lurking around and say, is the solved in the room with us? Well, since they didn't, in my mind, solve it, let's try to dig a little bit deeper. Because maybe this is nothing more than a man who had an unfortunate mental episode, stripped off all his clothes, got into a wreck somehow, and maybe the person in a white jacket was just a good Samaritan trying to see if he could help. A little curious, because other good Samaritans were driving cars, and this person was not reported to be from another car and has never come forward to say, I was a good Samaritan. He clearly was very injured. Even though he was alive, I walked away. Didn't call the police, right? So let's dig a little bit deeper then, because though the police said YOGTZE had nothing to do with this, it is the start of kind of a domino effect of what ultimately led to his death that night. He was just at home. If he would have just stayed at home with his wife, none of this would have happened, right? But he said a light bulb went off in his head. He got it. And up until this point, remember, he'd been experiencing paranoia, and he had thought that they, we don't know who they is, are getting him. And on October 25th, when he shot up and said, I got it, he wrote down something that looked like YOGTZE. So what does YOGTZE mean? This might not be a surprise to you, but YOGTZE does not mean anything in any language. So obviously deciphering exactly what it could mean is difficult, especially because people aren't even in agreement that YOGTZE is what Günther wrote. The part most in question is the letter G, which many people speculate may have been a 6. Yet others have speculated that the O could be a 0 and that the Z is a 2. In other words, this is generally what it looks like, but we're not even sure if it's letters or numbers. So if all of these are correct, that would make Günther's message Y06T2E. Not a word, but a mix of letters and numbers. And the thing with that is, that does mean something. That's the call sign to a Romanian radio station, but there's no known connection to this radio station. So it's possible that, there's actually so many iterations, right? Every letter could be multiple different things. Is it just possible that somehow this happens to be the Romanian radio station call sign? Or did it mean something more? Now, yet other people speculate that maybe this is the license plate number, and maybe the car was connected to his death. Maybe he knew something and he wrote this down, and it was not a word or a radio call station sign, but rather a license plate. Now, this did happen hours before he was killed, so at the time of foreshadowing, it's unlikely. I don't even know my own license plate number, to be honest. So for him to foresee that he was going to be killed, maybe run over by another car, and write down
He's psychic.
The psychic license plate number seems a little unlikely.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Now, there's also a problem that German license plates actually begin with a city code, which doesn't match what he wrote down at all. So while in principle, you could probably imagine a license plate, at this time in Germany, this wouldn't have matched any license plate.
So another popular theory is that the message was related to his work as a food engineer or was scientific in some way, had something to do with his science background. Some people have said, look, YOGTZE is an anagram for zygote. There you go. Solved it. So zygote, you might be thinking, well, why would he write zygote? Why would he write an English word? Well, it's not an English word, it's Greek. And zygote would be the same in German. So if for some reason he's thinking about zygotes, but he don't want to write zygote down, maybe he wrote YOGTZE. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's, people doing the best they can. A little bit of a stretch. Maybe this is some sort of genetic modification thing, which would be a little early. It's 1984, so I don't know that.
They didn't even know
Günther,
DNA.
Yeah, I don't know that Günther, food science engineer, is thinking about some sort of like chimeric DNA food thing, and that's what he's doing. And then some people thought maybe it's somehow a reference to something that Günther was aware of or witnessed in his job, and he's trying to think of a way to convey it, and that's what the eureka moment was. This is how he's going to convey to the world what he's seen, though if that's what he's trying to do, it hasn't worked.
So along the same lines, others have pointed to the last 3 letters of this message, TZE. Now, TZE is a flavoring used in yogurt, so it's possible that Günther knew what it was, but it's not clear what sort of meaning that would have been here, because there is this kind of like apostrophe or comma between the first 3 letters and the second 3 letters. But what's a yog flavoring? Yogurt flavoring? Maybe that's what it is. But again, that's not clear that this would have any sort of meaning. The biggest issue with the YOGTZE note in general, obviously, is that we're only relying on Stoll's wife's memory of these strange string of letters. Since this note was thrown away, there's no way to confirm if this was even what it said. Because at this time, I mean, she didn't think it was important enough to save, and it probably wasn't, because he was probably spouting off a bunch of paranoid things at this time anyway. And so we don't even know that it's YOGTZE or any iteration of what it looked like. That's just what she remembers. And even if we could determine the meaning of this note, police don't believe this has anything to do with his death.
Which, like I said, is very unfulfilling. Okay, so we know the official view. Before we get to our theories, we know the official view of what happened here from the police. Let's talk about some alternative theories. And this is a case. We're going back to our roots. Because there are people who believe that what actually happened here was an alien abduction. And this is a timely episode because, the United States government is releasing all these files about aliens. It's the biggest non-story ever. But nevertheless, a lot of you are following that closely. And hey, maybe it all will be revealed. Maybe somewhere in those files is Günther Stoll's abduction. Some people believe that he could have been abducted by aliens. And there are a few things that actually suggest that might have been what happened. Number one, there are hours unaccounted for that evening when the abduction could have occurred. Missing time is a very common thing in alien abductions. You see it a lot because that's when you're up in the mothership. And then, you're driving along, it's 9 o'clock, you blink, and all of a sudden it's midnight, and you're like, what happened? Well, you were being tested on by the aliens, and they put you back in the car, and you didn't even know, and you lost all this time. So that's a possibility. Günther lost that time. Also, what is Günther? He's naked. And everybody knows when aliens abduct you, the first thing they do is take off all your clothes, because they're into that. Aliens.
They're into that.
So, they, wear his clothes. On some planet on the other side of the galaxy, you're never going to find him because they took him with them. They didn't take his shoes. They just took his clothes. So there you go. That also points to alien abduction. They drop him back in the car. He's freaking out. He's probably trying to get away. He's naked. He doesn't know why. How could those 4 people fit in that small car? Because they were tiny little aliens, little green men in the car. They weren't friends, but they weren't people either. Those are the aliens, and that's what happened to him, and that's how he died. And maybe YOGTZE was somehow related to the aliens. I don't know exactly how, but could have been. And maybe that's why they got him, because he knew about the aliens. Watch out. If you're looking through the files, search for YOGTZE. See if it comes up. Maybe that's the name of their planet, for all I know. Anyways, so that's a possibility. Alien abductions.
But I will say, I'm pretty much an expert on alien abductions at this point. Usually when you lose time, you lose a little bit more than just like an hour or two. So
it's true.
He didn't lose like 30 years.
Whatever.
Or even like 6 weeks. He lost a couple hours. And to be honest, when I get lost, that's about the amount of time it takes me to find my way back. So small things. I'm not going to say I don't believe, but there's not actually it's not your typical loss of time, shall we say. And they left his shoes on. I guess they don't have to test his feet, just the rest of his body.
Feet, aliens don't like feet. Now, one thing I'll say, and Alice points this out, and this is true, the missing time, even if you're not talking about alien abductions, is often focused on in this case because there is time that's hard to account for, and you can imagine any number of things were happening during that period. Recall a few things. Number one, he didn't have Google Maps, so particularly given that he seems to be driving to different locations, there's no telling what route he took. Just because he's 60 miles away doesn't mean he drove 60 miles straight. That's the first thing. Second thing, he seems to be driving erratically. It's not as if, for instance, we know he left work that day and it's a 15-minute drive and he didn't arrive for 2 hours, and we're trying to figure out what happened for that hour and 45 minutes. It's not a situation like that. He's not going anywhere in particular. We have no idea where he was headed when the wreck happened. So saying there's missing time, I think, is probably just incorrect. I think what really happened is he either walked around his hometown for a while before he got back in the car and drove off, or he drove aimlessly until he either met the people who were responsible for his death or was in this accident.
You guys have heard us talk about our absolute favorite blanket on the market, and that's Lola Blankets. Guys, it's not just our favorite blankets now. It's become my go-to gift for literally everyone in my life. I have a huge Lola blanket on my couch in my living room, and the first thing anyone does when they come to my house is wrap themselves in a Lola blanket. As a result, I've just begun buying Lola blankets for my friends because it is the perfect gift. Their designs and colors can match any decor that you're going for, and it works in just about anyone's home. Every time someone asks me what my favorite blanket is, they don't even have to wait for me to blurt out Lola blankets. And as soon as they feel my blanket, they know why. Lola is the world's #1 blanket crafted with ultra soft luxury faux fur and a signature 4-way stretch that people instantly obsess over the second they touch it. And it's machine washable, double hemmed, and built to last for years, making it a truly meaningful long-term gift. My 4 kids jump all over it, wrap themselves in it. I wash it all the time. It still looks brand new. It stays flawless. There's no shedding, no pilling, no delicate care worries, which makes it a gift people can enjoy every day. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. Lola has over 20,000 5-star reviews, thousands of people gifting it, loving it, and talking about it. There's a reason it's called the world's #1 blanket. It's the gift people don't stop raving about. And Lola Blankets has collabed with a number of amazing designers. They've done limited editions with Tezza, Harmony Bose, and Rachel Parcell. But you've got to move fast. These drops always sell out. And don't miss the matching pillows. They look amazing, and you save when bundling. For a limited time, our listeners can get 40% off select Lola blanket products with code Prosecutors at checkout. Just head to lolablankets.com and use code Prosecutors. After you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and let them know we sent you. Wrap yourself in luxury with Lola Blankets. Summer always makes me rethink what I'm reaching for every day. Lighter fabrics, better materials, pieces that just feel good the moment you put them on and look effortless. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on high-quality essentials. Think breathable linen, soft organic cotton, washable silk, but without the luxury markup. It's that rare balance where everything feels elevated, but still easy. Quince has beautiful everyday pieces like 100% European linen pants that I keep wearing day after day. They keep me cool. I was on an airplane today and I wore those linen pants. They made me look elevated, but I was so comfortable. They also have tops with styles starting at $32. Their denim is soft and easy to wear, and their organic cotton sweaters are perfect for layering on cool summer nights. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Quince works directly with ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality, not brand markup. And it's not just clothing. Quince has really become a destination for elevated essentials across the home, kitchen, bedding, and beyond. I absolutely love their sheets and have changed out all the sheets in my house with Quince bedding. It makes it easy to bring a more premium feel into everyday life. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/prosecutors for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/prosecutors for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/prosecutors.
The question isn't whether the world is changing. It's whether you'll be ready for it. At Arizona State University, your education is built around the careers of the future. You learn from renowned faculty and researchers who are driving their fields forward, not just teaching about it. It's why we're ranked #1 in innovation and #2 in employability among U.S. public universities. Future-proof your career. Explore more than 350 programs at asuonline.asu.edu. That's a degree better.
So it's obviously aliens. But in case it wasn't aliens, we'll talk about another theory. And that is the one that has kept this mystery alive for 40 years. And that's murder and conspiracy, right? So people remain unsatisfied with the investigators' official determination in this case, and you can see why. There's a lot of unanswered questions. I still don't understand how someone catapults into the passenger side seat without a seatbelt, but not through the windshield. Now, remember, witnesses do say they saw someone walking away from the scene in that white jacket. There was also other witnesses who recalled seeing a hitchhiker in the area that night. Now, if these witness sightings were to be believed, someone could have murdered Stoll that night and staged it to look like an accident. Many believe the motivation here would have been related maybe to his work as a food engineer. They really wanted the yogurt flavoring recipe. And I say that because we talked about the current conspiracy about NASA scientists or astronauts or whatnot. I'm not saying that a food engineer isn't like the sexiest kind of person to be murdering for conspiracy theories, but it's not totally clear what like state secrets he may be holding or food engineering secrets he may be holding that would make him the target of this murder plot. But nonetheless, people think that perhaps he was being targeted for his work. Now, maybe Stoll just saw something he shouldn't have. Maybe he saw the beginnings of genetic engineering for food, and he was going to be a whistleblower. Now, the problem with this theory is that there's really no basis for believing that Stoll had any insider knowledge of anything nefarious in the food industry. And at the time of his death, he wasn't even employed. He was paranoid. He was unemployed. He was probably honestly spiraling because he was unemployed, because he had to sit at home all the time. You know, being in a regular kind of rhythm, such as having a job, can do wonders for one's mental health, and the opposite is true too. So he wasn't even employed at this time. He probably, if he had any knowledge, what was he going to do with it? He didn't even have a job. So he may have been murdered, but I don't know that he was the target of some massive conspiracy to silence him because of his knowledge in the food engineering business.
Yeah, and so I guess that brings us to our theories in this case. I will say this. I've been interested in this case for a long time. I followed it when the new revelations came out from the German police, was very disappointed in what they said. But, I mean, look, I think we all have to acknowledge that probably what happened here is Günther was going through some sort of mental break and had an accident and got into a wreck. That probably is what happened, and that's how he died. He probably was spiraling all day. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know what YOGTZE means. I think only he knew, and he's no longer with us. In fact, we don't even have the original message. But I do think there's an alternative that, to me, is a little bit more satisfying, and I want to suggest that as a possible theory. And I'm interested to hear what Alice thinks about this. So I do think he was suffering from mental illness. He was spiraling. I have no idea what the YOGTZE thing means. You know, it could be it's a code for something that only he realized. You know, it could be one of those things. I don't know if this ever happened to you, Alice. Do you ever have a dream and in the dream, it feels like you've stumbled upon something brilliant? This happens to me sometimes as a writer. Like, I'll have a dream and I'll be like, wow, that storyline in that dream was awesome. I should write that down so that I can write that story later. And I'll wake up and I'll write it down right when I wake up, and I'll go back to sleep. And then I wake up the next morning and I read what I wrote and I think, this just makes no sense. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I thought that was so brilliant, but this is just crap, right? Has that ever happened to you? Anything
happens
like
to me
that?
All the time. And not even in sleep. Like, I'll be in like school pickup line. I'm like, I got to write this word down. And I put it in my notes in my phone. And I read it later. I'm like, I thought that was a good word. That's not good at all.
Yeah. And I have written myself notes and looked at them later and had no idea what they mean. Like, I've looked at the notes, which are supposed to remind me to do something, remind me something, and read them and be like, I have no idea. That might as well have been an alien who wrote that, because I don't know what that wasn't me. That was some earlier iteration of me that no longer exists. And I think everybody's had that experience, and it could have been something like that. And the fact that he is in paranoia and he's dealing with mental illness makes it even worse. That it's absolutely inexplicable to us, and maybe it would have been inexplicable to him. But I think what we can say is that was going on. He goes to the pub. Maybe there's something physically wrong with him that we don't really even know. Maybe he's not eating. Like, why did he collapse? Could have been a lot of things. He could have been not eating. He could have been not sleeping. It could have been some sort of mental health issue. Could have been some sort of physical undiagnosed thing that even to this day we don't know. Causes him to collapse. He hits his head. Now we have, building on things. He then drives to his hometown, which is a strange decision. He goes to this old woman's house. He talks about something terrible is going to happen tonight. Where are his clothes? I think the simplest answer for that is somewhere between that old lady and where he ended up. He just takes his clothes off. Maybe he throws them out the window. Maybe he throws them in a lake. Maybe he throws them on the side of the road. And it's in a place 60 miles away from where he ends up that if somebody found him or saw him, they would have no idea what those clothes signify or why they're there. They would just think, wow, that's weird. There's some clothes on the side of the road. There's some clothes in the forest, right? So I think he leaves to go wherever he's going to go, which I don't think he necessarily knows. I think he takes his clothes off. I think he leaves his shoes on. I think at some point, I don't know that I think this, but this is my theory that fits the facts that we know. I think at some point he pulls that car over on the side of the road and he gets out of the car. And I think he's walking around naked, except for his shoes, in the middle of the road. And I think somebody hits him. I think the police are wrong to say that he wasn't run over. I think that initial thought was correct. I think they hit him. I think they actually knock him out of his shoes. I think 4 guys get out of the car that hit him. They find him. He's like delirious. I think they get his shoes, throw him in his car, which is parked on the side of the road. I think they put him in the passenger seat and they decide to stage an accident. I think the other 3 guys then drove down the road a little bit. The guy in the white jacket is either in the car and starts it moving towards some trees and then jumps out or whatever. He gets it going towards those trees. He gets out of the car crashes. Günther's still in the passenger seat because that's where he was, because the guy driving was the one who directed it to the cars. He then gets up. He starts walking back to where his buddies have parked just down the road. It's at that point the truckers show up. They see him walking away. He gets in the car with his buddies. They drive off. They never speak of it again. The initial review is actually correct. He was hit by a car, but then 40 years later, the police look at it again and they decide, you know what? Much more likely is no one else was involved. This was just an accident. Could his injuries have been consistent with an accident? Yeah. So that's what we're going to say. That's kind of what I think happened. I think it fits with the facts and it fits with independent facts other than just what Günther is saying. And it means the men and the man in the white jacket are not just unrelated or hallucinations. There was something connected to him, but still, ultimately, it's the mental illness that led to his death.
Yeah, I know. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but as I was going through the facts, it hewed very closely to that. I think everything leading up to what ultimately killed him, and I think it was someone else, whether it was intentional or it was an accident, and likely it was an accident, because I think he took off all his clothes. Maybe he thought he had ants all over himself, or he thought that someone was going to come get him, and this way they couldn't find him if he didn't have his clothes on because they were tracking him from earlier. And he is quite literally like dancing in the middle of the road, not dancing like joyfully, but because he is having a mental episode. And it's 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. and a car veers around, and those guys were probably drinking, because if they're out at 2 or 3 a.m., they're probably coming back from the pub themselves, and they may not have actually been thinking in their right mind, which is why they decide to stage an accident that doesn't really look like an accident in the sense that they put their victim in the passenger seat. Like, it probably would have been better if they put him in the driver's seat and pushed his car in the direction, put his foot on the gas or something like that. But I think that they were probably impaired and they were going to get in more trouble than just hitting a person. Maybe they were all drunk or something like that. I don't know if it was 4 people, could have been 2 people, and he was seeing double. He had hit his head earlier in the night. I think the YOGTZE, the going to the pub, the hitting his head, the driving off, the going and talking to the woman who he knew from his hometown, but kind of knew, not really knew. It's not like it was a childhood best friend or even his parents. All of that was just a mental episode, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I've had several people in my life go through very intense periods of paranoia. And I don't know if this is the hallmark of paranoia, but at least in my experience, the people who are in the midst of paranoia, they can still speak to me and they see me. It's not like they can't see me, but always they're out to get me. That is something I think that is very common in the paranoia. You're being watched like the Truman Show, or the government has bugged all your phones, or we're all in some sort of a Hunger Games where everyone is against you and we're all colluding against you. So every whisper, every phone call is something against you, and the paranoia is immense. And while that person can still do things like drive and walk and write and even talk to you, like look you in the eyes and talk to you, they are living in a different world than the one that you see. And I think everything was part of this immense, even if it was moderate paranoia earlier, I think something happened and we don't know. The mind is an incredibly mysterious thing. I think the fact that he had moderate paranoia doesn't mean he had moderate paranoia that night. I think it was a ramp up to the immense paranoid break that he had in that moment, and that he stripped off his own clothes. And he didn't take off his shoes because he was probably outside of his car and it would hurt to walk barefoot. And so he probably stripped off his clothes in a frenzy, and that was somehow going to save him, or that was part of the plan to make sure they didn't get him. And what happened next was either nefarious or an accident. The only way I can see it nefarious is there's this weird person dancing in the middle of the road, and you're with a bunch of guys in the car and you're all drunk and you're like, what if we try to hit that doofus who was in the car? Doesn't matter. I do think he was hit by someone else because he did not catapult from the driver's seat to the passenger seat and die from those injuries. I think he did see something, whether it was 4 people, 2 people. I think it was more than one person, because I agree with you. The person who was walking away injured, they may have been injured from the initial hit when they hit Günther, or it may have been this staged crash. But they clearly were able to get away, so likely there was someone else. And I think this is incredibly sad, but really I don't think there's a conspiracy or a mystery that Günther was having a mental episode. It is a mystery who tried to cover this up, but I think it was probably something like an accident and they freaked out.
And I'll say this, the one thing I believe absolutely is the case is there was someone else in the car when the accident happened, and I think the person in white, in the white jacket, was that person. Whether it was what we just described or the hitchhiker. A hitchhiker was in that car with him and it happened. Like, I don't think the truckers made that up. I think they made up seeing a man in a white jacket who appeared to be injured walking away from the scene of the crime. And it amazes me that the German police so easily dismiss that.
Especially when it's 2 independent truckers who don't know each other, nor do they know Günther.
Right.
That's incredibly powerful.
So it's possible Günther picked this guy up. I mean, I guess if somebody stopped to pick me up and they were naked, I'd have to make a real hard decision about whether or not, how desperate am I for a ride? You know, I mean, I don't know exactly what happened there. I just think there's more to this. I think there's more to this than what we have. And Günther's paranoia led to it. But as we've discussed many times, being paranoid can put you in a place where something terrible can happen to you. And, you know, we talked about, and I can't remember his name, and maybe you can remember his name, or maybe someone in the chat can remember his name. The man, he was from Canada. He ends up in Nashville. He's murdered. A very strange situation. We covered the case.
It's not the guy who ended up in army fatigues in Washington.
No, that's David Lewis. He came from Texas. This is a guy who he was, and normally I can remember this, Blair Adams. Sorry, just took a second. So Blair Adams is a man from Canada. And what's crazy about these cases, we've covered so many of these sort of great mystery cases. So many of them are tied to mental illness. It's really sad. Some of the greatest mysteries in true crime are really just mental illness, and they're mysteries because we can't understand what happened, and it's so weird and unusual because it's someone who's suffering from mental illness. Blair Adams, as you may recall, very paranoid, visited a neighbor's house in the middle of the night, much like this, saying that someone was after him, then goes on a cross-country drive, ends up in Knoxville, Tennessee, dead next to a construction site in a very strange circumstance. And we talked about what happened there. Was it that someone really was after him and tracked him all the way there and murdered him? Or did he, in his very paranoid, unusual state, run into someone and something happened and he ended up dead? And I think that's what we have here. We have a man who was extremely vulnerable, extremely apt to suffer something bad happening to him, who may have either put himself in a circumstance where an accident was inevitable. There was that case this week, the man who jumped over the fence at Denver Airport and ran onto the active runway and got hit by a plane and killed. You know, that's obviously someone who was in a very bad state, who put themselves in a very bad place and ended up being killed. Could have been something like that. Could have been someone taking advantage of someone in that bad state. But what I am convinced of is that the German police's explanation is incomplete. I just don't think that's exactly what happened, even if they're right to point to the mental illness as the main problem.
Yeah, like you said, maybe it was purely administrative. They wanted to close out cases, but I think it doesn't do any justice to mental illness or to what happened here, obviously. And if anything, it's feeding the conspiracy theories in a case that I think, unfortunately, is not a conspiracy, is just mental illness.
All right, guys. Well, love to hear your thoughts on this, particularly if you're in Germany, what your thoughts are on this case, the German police, their position on this case, the letter, the note. What does YOGTZE mean to you? Do you have any insight on what might have been written? Was it numbers? Was it letters? Just really fascinated to hear your thoughts. So please shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. And like I said, we'll do a follow-up either here or on Legal Briefs with whatever you give us. Shoot us a message on social media @ProsecutorsPod on all the various social media things. If you want to bring your thoughts to the gallery on Facebook, do that. It's a great place. You'll have a lot of fun there. If you want to watch us record these and sort of see these pictures, you know, sort of live, please join our Patreon. It's only $3 a month. You get to watch us record these episodes, and you get the episodes early and ad-free. Now, if you want the episodes early and ad-free, but you don't want to join Patreon, we also have Apple subscriptions. And as we always say, regardless, if you want to join any of those things, you will always get our episodes eventually with ads. That will happen. So you can do that for free. I know times are tight for a lot of folks. All right, let's answer a question. So never trust bow ties. It's an interesting name.
I like that.
Never trust bow ties. Never trust bow ties wants to know. We hear often about how expensive the death penalty is. However, it's also used as a bargaining chip to get defendants to plea, which saves money. Do you think in the grand scheme of things, it's a wash for states and have it by saving the resources for those trials? What do you think, Alice?
I don't think you have the death penalty just to be able to have a bargaining chip. And I think the cost of it is not because the death penalty is expensive, but because of what's built up around it. The courts have really messed up how we deal with the appeals. And the death penalty itself has created kind of this machine that where we don't execute people. So then it ends up being very expensive. I don't think we should have the death penalty just so we have something to dangle over people for purposes of plea deals. I think we should have the death penalty for the most heinous of crimes because it is the deserving punishment and there's no rehabilitation. It is that heinous. That person shouldn't be here. But I don't think that it should purely exist just for bargaining purposes. Of course, that's a side effect when you have something that serious, that it ends up being a bargaining chip that you can use. But I don't like the argument that it only should exist so that we can have something worse on the table that'll make people come to the table. Because every single case, we shouldn't force plea deals. And nobody forces plea deals. These types of cases end up having typically immense amount of evidence against the person. Everyone is entitled to a trial, no matter how great the evidence is against you. And that shouldn't be a cost-saving mechanism, if that makes sense. There's the effects of having this and whatnot. Because when we talk about life and death, I don't like to think about it as like an economic game of how we can save money with it. It is true that it is incredibly expensive, but I haven't done the economics at all. It kind of makes me queasy to do an economic model of how much money it could be saving us because people are scared to get the death penalty and therefore take a plea deal.
Yeah, so I'll just say this. I find a lot of the arguments against death penalty to be really stupid, and the cost one is one of them, because it's either worth it or it's not. Like, I don't actually care how much it costs, number one. And number two, I think the cost argument is a little fake because it builds in things like litigation costs, which includes things like the amount the lawyers you're getting paid. Those lawyers are going to work for the state no matter what. It's just whether they're doing the death penalty case or doing something else. I also think if you got rid of the death penalty and you go to life without parole, you already have the anti-death by incarceration movement. That's what they call it, death by incarceration. You're going to have the same thing. If you're whatever your maximum punishment is, I think you're going to see the same type of litigation costs. I don't actually think it saves money. You make a good point about, I do think it's nice when people like Brian Kohberger can plead guilty and spare the family that kind of pain. You know, like, I often wonder if Richard Allen, if the death penalty had been on the table, would we have avoided all of this? Would we have avoided the fake innocence movement? Would we have avoided the pain of the trial? Would we have avoided the appeals? I think at the end of the day, if you want to think about the death penalty, you want to decide whether or not you're for the death penalty, don't the dollars and cents and all that stuff. Come on. We waste so much money in this country. It's barely even worth discussing the cost. You need to decide for yourself whether or not you think someone like, we just had, I mean, we've intentionally avoided discussing this case, but the Tanner Horner case, the murder of Athena Strand, absolutely horrific case. No question he did it. He is 100% guilty. He pled guilty. The only question was whether he got the death penalty. To me, that should be your touchstone as a person. You either think he should get the death penalty or you don't. And if you don't, then I think you should be against the death penalty, because that is a man who brutally murdered a child, and we know he did it. There's no question about it. For me, the death penalty is, I don't think you can have a just society without the death penalty. That's just my position on this. It's my opinion. I think when something like that happens, when someone murders a child like that, if you as a society cannot impose a death penalty on that person, then you have failed that child and you don't actually believe in justice. And I mean, I will go so far as to say there's some cowardice in that society, because that society is not willing to face the awesome, horrific idea of killing someone. As society, killing someone, taking their life, because that is what justice demands. I think that is a massive burden on society to do that. But I think if you want to have a truly just society, you have to face that head on and say, yes, in cases like that, we're going to do that. Now, how you structure it, how you avoid innocent people from receiving it, those are all debates I think we can all have. But I think if you want to be for or against the death penalty, do it on a purely moral basis. Don't get sucked into these like, well, it's really expensive. I mean, yeah, justice is expensive. It's a price worth paying. If you believe that's justice, then that's like the primary job of society. Everything else is gravy. You know, providing justice, defending the people, those are the primary things you want your government to do for you. That's what you give up when you enter into society. Fundamentally, what you give up when you enter into society is the right to seek vengeance on those who wrong you. That is a fundamental piece of the social contract. You're agreeing that the vendettas that destroyed Sicily, we're not doing that anymore. We're giving that over to the government. We're giving up our right of revenge, and we're trusting in the justice system to seek justice for us. That is like the key. And seeking justice in the preamble to the Constitution, it's like the first thing that's mentioned. So to me, decide whether or not you think it's necessary for justice. If you do, support it. If you don't, oppose it. That's how I think you should look at the death penalty. All right. On that easy, simple question, let us know what you think about the death penalty. Okay. All right, guys. Well, this has been fun as always. Probably next week we'll do something. I mean, it's always sad when someone dies, and obviously Günther Stoll died, and that's a very sad thing for him and his family, and I hate that it happened. But probably we're going to talk about something even more depressing next week. Alice, do you have any thoughts before we sign off for now?
I think you made a really good point earlier about how many of the true crime cases that we cover are actually not about crime at all, but about mental illness. And in these cases, because they're so sad, and this is 40 years ago, it doesn't change the devastation that his wife faced and those who loved him faced. But especially in these cases of paranoia, it is so difficult because, like I said earlier, you can continue to exist in your world. You just have like an added element where you're seeing the same things that the rest of us are seeing, but they have different import or different interpretation as to what's happening. Two people whispering and laughing are not just friends having a conversation. They're, part of a government conspiracy out to get you. Because of that, it's incredibly difficult to spot and to get help. But if you are able to be there for each other and to see this, there were people with him at the bar that night. No one may have understood how important this was. If someone had seen him dancing around on the side of the road without his clothes on, recognizing that this was, someone who was deeply in need of help, or maybe instead of just sending him away that night, maybe someone calling his parents directly and saying, hey, maybe you need to come and get him. Maybe there could have been a different outcome for Günther. But those are all the buts that we can't answer now. But what we can do is, as we've said so many times before, mental illness comes in so many forms. And I don't think that our justice system, or really even our society that we live in the United States here, fully knows how to deal with mental illness in a way that is compassionate and treats the person with dignity. And while we're hopefully figuring this out, I know there are many of you who listen to this podcast who are part of trying to create, a system that is better suited to dealing with people with mental illness. My only answer, the only way I know how to help fill those gaps right now, is community. Something that is very tenuous and has become much less common since COVID, and really even before COVID, really since social media and smartphones, is to put down phones and look at each other more often. Because I do think that we have to be the answer to spotting the vulnerabilities of those around us. It's probably not going to be a doctor who first spots it, because at least in my experience, it's been the struggle of those who have recognized the paranoia to help drag that person into treatment. But they're not going to see a doctor about their paranoia because they don't see that as the problem. So I guess this is a very long-winded way of saying thank you for being part of this community, and take these cases, and instead of just looking at how sad and tragic they are, to look forward in how you can be a part of answers for different outcomes for the other Günthers that may be out there.
And there's a reason Lisa Lam was the first case we did. People used to ask, our prosecutors, why are you doing? There's not even a trial in that case. We picked that case as our first case for a reason, because it exemplifies in so many ways this problem and this issue, and it is one that drives so much of what we see in these cases and really in the justice system in general. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Let us know what you think, particularly if you're in Germany. But we'll be back next week with a new case. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. The private practice lawyers.
All right, let's stop this because I know we have ads. Okay, so there's a family of birds that are living, they have a nest, and the birds have hatched. That's the word. But there's a mom and a dad. I didn't know that. I thought just one of the stayed around. But anyways, there's a mom and a dad, at least two adult birds, and the little birds have hatched. The kids are fascinated. They named the birds today. Would you like to guess what these birds' names are?
Tweety and Beaky.
would be normal names. Okay, so the mom's name. Well, let's start with the dad's name because that fits with what you just said. Dad's name, Flappy.
Flappy.
Yeah. Mom's name. Can you guess if the dad's name is Flappy? What would the mom's name be? You're never gonna guess it.
Okay.
It's Theodosia.
Hello, and welcome to Pluto Phone. If you know the name of the movie you'd like to see, just stream it for free on Pluto TV, where all your blockbuster favorites are landing all summer long. Catch Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy.
Fantastic.
Men in Black, 1 through 3.
That's what I'm talking about.
Mean Girls.
Shut up!
Titanic.
I'm the king of the world!
And so much more. For showtimes, press nothing. They're free 24/7.
That is so fetch.
On Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.